everyone! Welcome to Tangerine Planet, a place for kind thoughts, smart ideas, and a little sunshine for the world. Let's make a difference, one step at a time, together.
Okay, let's get into this. Close your eyes for a second, maybe, and just picture the Himalayas. You probably see Everest, K2, Annapurna, these huge, jagged, snow-covered peaks just shooting up into this perfect blue sky.
It's such an iconic image, isn't it? It represents, well, so much grandeur, nature, maybe even something spiritual for a lot of people.
Exactly. And it's why millions of people, I mean, literally millions, dream of seeing them, whether it's like from a rooftop in Kathmandu or maybe up close on a trek somewhere.
Or even just hoping for that glimpse from a plane window or a distant city.
Right. That view, that incredible panorama, it's almost like an expectation. It's baked into the whole idea of being in that part of the world.
And, well, the source material you've shared with us really lays this out clearly. That iconic view, that powerful expectation.
Yeah.
It's becoming harder and harder to actually experience.
Yeah.
Frustratingly difficult.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about, the usual mountain clouds rolling in.
Nope.
This is different. It's this persistent, thick, choking haze, pollution, basically, that's quite literally making the Himalayas vanish from sight for huge chunks of the year.
That's spot on. And this article we're looking at, it doesn't just talk about the haze in an abstract way. It really digs into what it feels like to live with this. It brings together all these different voices, people who've, known these views their whole lives, tourism operators who depend on them completely.
Then you've got the environmental scientists explaining the mechanics behind it all.
Right. And these really personal stories from someone who actually grew up seeing the mountains clearly and now goes back and they're just gone.
It's a real deep dive, isn't it, into what's a very visible environmental crisis. It shows how something like air pollution, which can seem a bit abstract sometimes, has these really concrete, even devastating impacts on, well, world-famous natural wonders and the communities that are so connected to them.
So our mission here for this deep dive is to really pull apart this source material. We want to understand what makes up this haze, what's causing it to get so much worse.
Explore those impacts, especially on the tourism industry, which is, absolutely vital for the region.
Totally. And just really grasp why this incredible natural wonder, this global icon, is becoming, well, for a lot of people, just something you see in old pictures.
Yeah, a memory or a postcard.
We're going to, dive into the layers here, try to bring the reality behind those fading mountain views into focus.
And as we start to unpack all this, maybe it's worth asking you, the listener, to think about, what does it really mean when a symbol of nature's enduring power is, well, literally being erased by human activity? What stands out to you as we begin exploring this?
The article does a great job grounding this right away, starting with a very personal angle. The author grew up in Kathmandu, Nepal's capital, and you can just try to imagine what that must have been like.
Having the highest mountains on Earth as your sort of everyday backdrop, just casually there on the horizon.
Exactly. Seeing those peaks day after day, just there, part of the normal view.
And that personal history, that memory, it creates such a stark contrast with their more recent visits that are described.
Yeah, the article talks about the shock, really, of going back to a place that's defined by these views and finding them just consistently not there.
It's not just a vague feeling either, is it? The specific stories, the anecdotes in the piece, they really hit home how severe this problem is.
Definitely. Like that story about the international flight trying to land in Kathmandu last April.
Right, I remember reading that.
Because the visibility was so bad, and not from fog or rain, the usual suspects, but from this thick haze, the plane apparently had to circle the airport nearly 20 times.
20 times. Just think about that. A major international airport basically crippled for, a significant amount of time, not by a storm, but by air pollution.
It's kind of mind-boggling.
It really elevates the issue, doesn't it? It's not just about losing a nice view. It's impacting critical infrastructure, safety.
And for the author, that was just the start of the trip, that frustrating arrival. They checked into a hotel, one specifically chosen because it was at a good elevation.
The kind of place you book because you expect mountain views on a clear day.
Exactly. But for their whole stay, 2 weeks, the article says nothing, just this thick, kind of grayish, soupy haze.
That must be incredibly disheartening. You're in the right place, potentially at the right time of year, historically speaking.
Yeah.
And the majestic view you came for is just an opaque wall.
And then it got even worse, apparently. They went to Nagarko.
Ah, Nagarko. Famous viewpoint near Kathmandu.
Right. The place known specifically for its sunrise, sunset, and these just unbelievable Himalayan vistas. Should be prime viewing. But the author describes looking out from Nagarko and seeing nothing but haze, so thick, so pervasive that the quote is, "It was as if the mountains did not exist."
Wow. As if the mountains did not exist.
Yeah.
That phrase. It's chilling, really.
It is.
It's not just, oh, the view's a bit hazy today. It's erasure. From a world-famous viewpoint, the main attraction is literally invisible.
And the article is careful to point out this isn't just one person's bad luck or perception. Scientists are confirming this.
Exactly. It's not just anecdotal. Environmental scientists, meteorologists, they're looking at the data and confirming that these hazy conditions, they're getting much more intense and they're sticking around for way longer than they used to.
Which means, obviously, a huge reduction in visibility across the whole region.
A drastic reduction, yeah.
So maybe we should pause here and just clarify, what exactly is this haze, according to the source? It's not just clouds, right?
No, definitely not clouds. The article defines it as haze that's formed by a combination of pollutants. Specifically, it mentions dust particles and smoke particles, mostly from fires.
Okay, tiny particles just hanging in the air.
Right. They're small enough to stay suspended, but there's so many of them. And their size and type means they basically scatter and absorb light. That's what cuts down the visibility.
And is there like a technical definition?
Yeah, the source uses a threshold definition. It says visibility is reduced to less than 5,000 meters. That's about, 16,400 feet?
Okay.
Below that level, the conditions are officially classed as hazy.
Got it. So it's microscopic pollution particles acting like a physical barrier to light, making the air unclear.
Pretty much, yeah. And a really key point the article makes is how this haze tends to just sit there. It gets stagnant, especially during certain weather conditions, which crucially seem to be happening more often in the dry season.
Right. And this leads to another critical point the source brings up, the timing.
Well,
When is this haze actually happening? Because traditionally, the clearest times, the best times for tourism.
or spring, March to May, and autumn, October, November.
Exactly. Those months were famous for crisp air, incredible long-distance mountain views. That's when people plan their trips.
Yes, definitely. Trekkers, tourists, they aimed for those seasons.
Yeah.
Especially that post-monsoon autumn window, that was almost guaranteed to use stunning clarity. But now, the article explains, it's a different story. You've got this complex mix of rising temperatures, changes in rainfall patterns, and just soaring air pollution levels.
And the result.
The result is that thick haze is becoming really common even during those spring months that used to be so clear.
And it's starting earlier too, right? Sometimes showing up as early as December now.
Yeah, it's blurring those traditional seasonal lines, which is a huge contrast to the monsoon season, June to September.
Right, because visibility is low then too, but that's different.
Totally different. That's because of monsoon clouds and, importantly, heavy rain. The rain actually washes the pollution particles out of the air.
Ah, okay.
The problem now is this dry season haze that just lingers during the periods that used to be clear. The pollution isn't getting washed away.
And this shift in timing hitting those prime tourist seasons, that's devastating. It strikes right at the economic heart of the region.
Absolutely. The tourism industry there is just so heavily reliant on people being able to see those mountains.
In the article, it gives us some really powerful stories from people whose whole lives, their businesses, are caught up in this. The economic cost is explored in quite a bit of detail.
Yeah, we hear from Yogendra Shakya. He's run a hotel in Nagarko since 1996.
So he's seen the change happen over decades.
Exactly. From reliably clear views back then to this new hazy normal.
And his reaction, what he's had to do, it really tells you how bad things are. He hasn't just, put up with it. He's had to fundamentally change his business.
Yeah, the article quotes him saying he can no longer brand the place for views of sunrise, sunset, and Himalayas as I did in the past.
Just think about that for a second. A hotel owner in Nagarko, a place known almost exclusively for those views, can't sell that anymore.
It's his main selling point. Gone. He's had to rebrand, focus on history, culture, other things.
Because, as he says, you can't have those things mostly now because of the haze.
It's like imagine a beachfront hotel where the ocean view disappears. What do? It's a survival strategy, basically. The core product is just not reliable anymore.
It's a massive economic shock. And then the article introduces Lucky Chetri. She's described as a pioneering female trekking guide in Nepal.
Right, and her experience shows how this hits the guiding community directly. She puts a real number on the damage.
A staggering number. She reports a 40% drop in her business. 40%.
Right.
Just directly because of the hazy conditions.
40%. That's not just a slow season. That's threatening the viability of her business and the income of all the guides she works with.
And she shares a specific story from last year, which is just really sad. She had to actually give money back to a group of trekkers. Why? Because her guides, even though they led the trek perfectly well,
they couldn't deliver the main promise.
Exactly. They couldn't show them the Himalayas. The views just weren't there. Imagine being a guide. That's your job, your passion, showing people these incredible mountains, and they're just invisible.
It must be incredibly frustrating. And the article quotes her saying it creates this feeling of guilt.
Yeah, we are left to do business with guilt, she says, and there is nothing we can do about the haze.
That line, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? It just captures the powerlessness that people on the front lines must feel. Their business, their skills, their connection to the place, all undermined by this haze they can't control.
And this feeling, this distress, it seems to be industry-wide. We hear from Krishna Acharya, who chairs the Trekking Agents Association of Nepal for the province.
And he's very blunt about it. He's quoted saying the industry is in deep trouble.
He draws that direct line. No sighting of the Himalayas means no business.
Simple as that.
It's not an exaggeration. It's the reality for an economy built around that natural spectacle. And the article mentions that many operators, trekking companies, they're actually thinking about getting out of the business entirely.
Because the main thing they sell just isn't there reliably anymore.
Which, if experienced guides and operators leave, that has knock-on effects for the whole tourism setup in the region, too.
Absolutely. And it's not just the industry feeling it. The disappointment extends to the tourists themselves. The article brings in the perspective of John Carroll, an Australian visitor.
Right, and he's been visiting Nepal since 1986, so he has decades of comparison.
He knows what it used to look like, and he describes not seeing the mountains on his recent trips as a major letdown.
His long-term view is really important here. He says, it wasn't like this 10 years ago, but now the haze seems to have taken over, and it is extraordinarily disappointing for visitors like me.
So it confirms it's not just a bad year here or there. It's a noticeable accelerating trend, even for seasoned visitors who remember the clear skies.
So the big picture here is clear. The haze isn't just, spoiling the photos. It's actively dismantling the economic foundation of tourism, affecting everyone from hotel owners to guides, and leaving visitors deeply disappointed.
And crucially, the article stresses this isn't just a Nepal problem. While Kathmandu and Everest often get the headlines, this haze is a regional issue. It's impacting views of the Himalayas right across different countries.
Okay, so where else? What about the Indian side?
On the Indian side, near the central Himalayas, the source says it's a similar story. Hoteliers, tour operators, they're reporting the same things. The haze is denser than before, and it comes back much quicker after any brief clearing.
So, less respite.
Exactly. The article introduces Malika Virdi, who runs a community tourism project in Uttarakhand, India. She also connects the persistent haze to changing weather.
How so?
She talks about experiencing long dry spells and then a heavy downpour, unlike in the past.
Right. And how does that affect the haze?
Well, she explains that this different rainfall pattern means the haze doesn't get washed out of the air as often or as effectively. Regular lighter rain might have helped clear things periodically.
But now you get these long, dry stretches where the pollution just builds up and up.
Precisely. And then maybe a massive downpour comes, but it doesn't seem to fully scrub the air clean after such a long accumulation.
Interesting. Does she mention anything else?
Yeah, an interesting point she makes is that tourists, despite the haze, are often quite persistent. Some who miss out on the views actually come back again, hoping for better luck next time.
That really shows the powerful draw of these mountains, doesn't it? Even with the odds getting worse.
It really does.
Okay, so that's Nepal and India. What about further west? Pakistan.
The article looks west, too, towards the western Himalayas in Pakistan. Cities like Peshawar and Gilgit are mentioned.
And the situation there.
It notes that those areas seem relatively less affected compared to, say, Nepal or central India.
Why is that?
Mainly geography. The big mountain ranges you see from those cities are just farther away from the really dense, polluted urban centers.
Okay, so distance helps a bit.
It seems to buffer it slightly. However, even there, the trend is visible. Locals are reporting that mountain ranges you could easily see from places like Peshawar in the past. Well, now they're often hidden by haze, too.
So even if it's maybe less severe, the problem still exists.
Definitely. The source quotes Asif Shuja, who used to head Pakistan's Environmental Protection Agency. He confirms it, saying, "The sheet of haze remains hanging for a longer period, and we don't see the mountains that we could in the past."
So the pattern holds across the region, even if the intensity varies. Persistent haze, longer duration, disappearing views.
That's the consistent story coming through in the source material, yeah.
Okay. So we've established the problem, we felt the personal and economic impact, we know it's widespread geographically. Let's really get into the science now, the why. What's actually causing this haze to get so bad? The source digs into this, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It connects the haze directly and unequivocally to severe air pollution. And it sets the context. Cities across South Asia are routinely, topping global lists for the worst air quality.
Right, that's a crucial piece of context. This isn't some natural mountain weather thing.
Not at all. It's pollution generated by human activity in the incredibly densely populated regions surrounding and sometimes within the Himalayan foothills that then gets trapped or drifts towards the mountains.
Okay, so what are the main sources of this pollution, according to the article?
It breaks them down. There are the year-round sources, the sort of baseline pollution from everyday life in cities and industrial areas.
Like traffic.
Exactly. Vehicle emissions, millions of cars, trucks, motorcycles, then industrial emissions from factories. Lots of dust from constant infrastructure, construction roads, buildings.
Yeah, you see that everywhere in developing areas.
And also dust just kicked up from dry, unpaved gravel roads, which are common.
So the kind of standard byproducts of urbanization and industrial activity.
Pretty much. But then, layered on top of that baseline, you have these other major factors. They might be more seasonal, but the article suggests they're becoming more intense or happening more often.
Okay, like what?
A big one is soot from massive forest fires.
Forest fires in the Himalayas.
Yes, and the source links the increase in these fires to climate change specifically. The longer, hotter, dry seasons create perfect conditions for fires to start and spread and burn for longer.
Right, okay. So climate change makes the fires worse, and the fires pump huge amounts of smoke and particles into the air.
Exactly. A massive load of soot and other pollutants.
What else besides forest fires?
Another huge contributor mentioned is the burning of crop residues.
Ah, the stubble burning after harvest.
Right. It's a very common practice for farmers in large parts of northern India, Pakistan, and also Nepal. They burn the leftover stalks and stubble to clear the fields quickly and cheaply before planting the next crop.
And while it's seasonal, the scale must be enormous.
It's vast, and it releases these colossal plumes of smoke and particulate matter that can drift for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers across the entire region.
Wow. Okay, so you've got this constant year-round pollution from cities and industry. Then you add increasingly severe forest fires, possibly linked to climate change.
And this massive seasonal input from agricultural burning.
It's just an incredibly potent mix of stuff filling the air.
It really is. And then, crucially, the weather conditions play a huge role in what happens to all that pollution, specifically trapping it.
How does that work?
The article explains this phenomenon called temperature inversion.
Okay, what's that?
It's when you get a layer of warmer air sitting on top of a layer of cooler air down near the ground. Normally, air near the surface is warmer and rises, mixing the pollution upwards.
But with an inversion.
That warm layer acts like a lid. It stops the vertical mixing, so the cooler, denser air below, filled with all those pollutants.
It just gets trapped. It can't rise and disperse.
Exactly. It accumulates in the lower part of the atmosphere, right up to the height of that inversion layer.
Yeah.
And guess what? That altitude is often exactly where it blocks the view of the mountains.
Ah, okay. So the pollution is literally held down low, right in the line of sight.
That's right. And the article makes a direct link to climate change here, too. It says that the dry season, which is when these temperature inversions are more likely to form and persist, allowing the haze to just sit there and build up, is lasting longer now.
So climate change isn't just about, say, average temperature going up. It's changing the atmospheric patterns, the length of seasons, the way rain falls.
Yes, it's altering the very dynamics that used to help clear the air naturally during certain times of the year, which makes the existing pollution problem much, much worse.
That connection seems really critical.
It is. And the source quotes Dr. Samshwar Das. He's from the South Asia Meteorological Association. He reinforces this trend pretty starkly.
What does he say?
He states that hazes and dust storms are increasing in South Asia, and this trend is projected to continue due to climate change and other factors.
Projected to continue. That's worrying. It suggests this isn't a temporary blip.
No, the projection implies it's likely to get worse. or at least persist, unless there are major changes to emissions and maybe the impacts of climate change.
And the article backs this up with some specific data, right, from Pokhara Airport.
Yes, Pokhara. It's a major city in western Nepal, huge for tourism, right by Phua Lake, famous for its Annapurna views. They looked at the airport's records of hazy days.
And the numbers?
The numbers are just, well, they're jaw-dropping, frankly.
Yeah.
In 2020, Pokhara Airport recorded 23 days that met the definition of hazy conditions.
Okay, 23 days.
In 2021, just 1 year later, that number jumped to 84 hazy days.
Wow, more than tripled.
Yeah. And then fast forward to 2024.
What was it?
168 days.
168 days of haze in 2024.
168 days where visibility was below that 5,000-meter threshold. That's nearly half the entire year.
To go from 23 days to 168 in just 4 years, I mean, that's an incredibly rapid increase.
It's dramatic. And it's not just someone feeling like the air is worse. This is official meteorological data showing a clear, measurable, and rapid decline in visibility.
And you have to assume the impacts go beyond just the lost views and tourism, right? This kind of air quality.
Absolutely. Well, the article's main focus is the visual impact on the Himalayas and tourism. It does touch on the broader consequences.
Like public health.
Yes. It briefly mentions the, really serious public health crisis across South Asia that's driven by this toxic air. It's the same pollutants causing the haze that people are breathing in.
Leading to respiratory problems, heart issues.
All sorts of health problems. The air quality gets so bad sometimes, as the article notes, that it disrupts travel, like that plane circling Kathmandu, and they even have to close schools in major cities sometimes just to keep kids from breathing the dangerous air.
So it's an environmental crisis, an economic crisis, and a public health emergency all rolled into one.
Pretty much, yeah. And the experts quoted in the article, they don't mince words about how bad this is for the Himalayas specifically.
What's their assessment?
Given where the Himalayas are located downwind from some of the most polluted places on Earth, and combined with those weather patterns that trap pollution right up against the mountains, experts believe the Himalayas are likely the worst affected mountain range in the world by this type of pollution haze.
The worst affected in the world, that's quite a statement. It really puts the scale of this into perspective.
It does. It highlights the global significance of what's happening there.
And the article kind of concludes with this rather melancholic thought, doesn't it, about the future of that view.
Yeah, the idea that the scintillating view of the Himalayas, that image we all have in our heads, might increasingly become something you only really find in photographs, paintings, and postcards.
Suggesting that the actual direct experience of seeing them clearly with your own eyes could become a real rarity.
Replaced by pictures of how they used to look.
Yeah.
It's the potential loss of a profound, direct, natural experience.
And that loss, it's not just for the tourists paying for a view. It's for the people who live there, whose whole culture and identity is tied to those mountains.
And whose livelihoods often depend on sharing that beauty.
It really makes the costs of air pollution and climate change incredibly tangible, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We started with that really personal feeling, seeing a familiar, iconic view just disappear.
And then we moved into the hard data, confirming this rapid, measurable increase in haze, especially with those stark numbers from Pokhara.
We really unpacked the economic fallout, didn't we? The devastating impact on tourism across the whole region, hearing from hotel owners having to rebrand.
Guides losing huge amounts of business, feeling that guilt and helplessness.
Yeah.
Association heads talking about deep trouble for the industry.
We saw how it's not just one place, but a regional problem. Nepal, India, Pakistan. The haze is affecting the view across the board.
Yeah, then we drilled down into the science. That complex mix of pollution sources, the year-round urban and industrial stuff.
Compounded by those big spikes from forest fires, which seem linked to climate change, and the huge impact of agricultural burning.
All getting trapped by specific weather patterns like inversions, which are themselves lasting longer because of changes in the dry season, again linked back to climate change.
It's a complicated picture, but the connections seem pretty clear in the source material.
Very clear. And we also touched on that wider context, the serious public health crisis fueled by the same polluted air.
This whole deep dive, it really brings home how these big environmental changes, driven by us, by human activity, our emissions, how we use land, the warming climate.
They have these incredibly direct, visible, and sometimes devastating consequences.
Yeah, it's not just numbers on a chart. It's impacting iconic landscapes, actual communities, real economies that depend on them. It's all connected: air quality, climate, livelihoods.
It's a powerful story of that interconnectedness.
And I find myself coming back to that quote from Lucky Chetri, the trekking guide.
About the guilt.
Yeah, doing business with guilt because the mountains aren't visible, and that feeling that there's nothing we can do about the haze.
That sense of powerlessness,
Yeah.
facing such a huge environmental issue, it's really potent.
It is, and it makes you, the listener, maybe consider, what does it really mean when a community's connection to their home, their identity wrapped up in a natural wonder, and their way of making a living are all being literally hidden, obscured by forces that feel totally beyond their control?
It's a heavy question, and maybe on a broader scale, too.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean for all of us globally if a natural spectacle like the Himalayas, something so significant and beautiful,
becomes something you mostly just see in pictures or read about in history books?
Exactly. What's fundamentally lost when that direct personal connection fades away? Not just for tourism, but for how we relate to the natural world, and maybe how seriously we take these urgent warnings about pollution and climate change.
Yeah, it's definitely a question that sticks with you long after the view itself has disappeared into the haze.
Thanks for being with us today. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and tap the bell to keep the good vibes going. Let's join into healing our little world one step at a time, together. And all this is Tangerine Planet. Until next time.